And that's the northern flicker, Calliopetes auratus, bringing us in for episode 7. Welcome to the Dissectify podcast, the show that gets you curious about the wild world right outside your window. I'm your host, Nicholas Sines, bringing you content far too late every Tuesday night. Will that change? Maybe if I get my shit together. For the listeners, I'm wearing a new shirt. I got some Jurassic and late Cretaceous creatures going on here. I thought it was kind of fun, but we'll it'll work in later. Last episode, we talked about a snake in the industrial polluted seawater that uses melanin to adapt to its environment. This was the species Hemidocephalus annulatus, the turtle-headed sea snake. Is apparently able to use melanin in order to collect its toxic substances that are within its body, right? It eats these fish that are in polluted waters, gets the pollutants inside of itself, and then melanin is able to bind to these compounds, toxic compounds, keep it in the skin, and then when it sheds its skin, it sheds the toxic compounds. That got me thinking. Melanin has some other interesting stories attached to it. So I wanted to do an episode on it because I have it, other species have it, and I'm pretty sure I can't do the things that these species do. So I thought it was worth looking into. In this snake species, it acts like a toxic sponge, right? It soaks up these toxic compounds in the body and is able to help rid the body of them. Simply because the snake has this natural mechanism of shedding its skin, which, humans do shed our skin cells, but maybe it's too slow, and maybe there's a whole lot of other biochemistry going on in the background that is able to interact with these melanin compounds that maybe we don't have. Maybe that's what's going on. But the more I looked into it, the more I found out that it seems like scientists are relatively confused about what's going on. So I looked into the structure of these things, and if I can find something good, I'll post it on the YouTube video version of this. But essentially, they said that it is not one single compound, but a collection of compounds called chromophores. And each one of these are organic compounds that have alternating single and double bonds, which means due to their structure, they're able to absorb a specific band or a specific wavelength of light. And the strategy here with this structure of melanin is to basically just have a jumble of them, right? You have all of these different structures jumbled together. They all absorb different wavelengths of light. And because it's such a chaotic mess, as opposed to something like chlorophyll is like very targeted, what plants use to absorb sunlight and get the energy out of that, is very targeted to like specific bands of light in order to get the energy. Whereas melanin, it's like a shotgun approach. It has all of these structures jumbled together that all absorb different wavelengths of light. So when you have something coming in that might hit the DNA and change something, right, cause a mutation or some issue in the genetic information, the DNA, that you have just this mess in the way. And something in there, one of those structures in this big jumble is going to absorb that wavelength of light. So eventually, that photon that's coming in is going to hit something in this jumble and be absorbed immediately. And this happens in like a picosecond, which is like a trillionth of a second. And it happens so fast that once it's absorbed, the energy is released as heat. And it happens so quickly that no damage is done to the melanin structure. In us, it's the same structure, but this jumble of chromophores that is put in the way of our nucleus, right? So all the DNA is stored in the nucleus, and when we get a sunburn, that's DNA damage that has to be repaired. And it is repaired, but it's still a risk, and your body, once that's detected, produces a whole lot of melanin. It gets moved in front of the DNA to help shield that from further damage. But there's one place that has multiple examples of different uses of melanin. In 1986, I checked, their Chernobyl nuclear reactor number 4 melted down, and it was so violent that the uranium actually melted through multiple floors of reinforced concrete. And it got so hot that it made it all the way down. and to this day is not inhabited by humans, but still there's animal species and other species, as we'll talk about, are still there. And it's caused multiple changes, and melanin plays a role in both. So it's led to, right at the center, there's this huge lump of uranium that's still a massive source of radiation. And in general, just as a radius out from there, there's been a whole lot of contamination from ash and other debris and bits of the reactor. But as you go away from the reactor, it becomes less radioactive. The radiation drops just from the amount of contamination being less. But there's been, in that radius, a certain area that's called the exclusion zone, where people are generally not allowed into. And they collected this frog species, Hyla orientalis, inside the exclusion zone and outside the exclusion zone. Outside, it's a normal-looking green frog, but inside the exclusion zone, it's become this really dark brown frog, which is really interesting, right? So again, we're seeing another situation in which high levels of some environmental factor are causing melanin to become more selected for. The individuals that have more melanin were more likely to survive. So now we're seeing, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a storm going on outside. But yeah, the individuals within the exclusion zone were selected for to have higher levels of melanin. And after like 30, 40 years now, there's been enough of that selection force that we really see this dark adaptation occurring. But here's the example that really kind of blows my mind. While they were trying to figure out how bad is the radiation in next to this elephant's foot, right? Like the lump of uranium that's still sitting at the bottom of this plant and cooling very, very slowly, but it's still this massive source of radiation. And that comes in a couple of forms, so alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. Alpha is particles, right? So that's like protons actually like flying off of, where's the neutrons? Basically, there's different forms, and alpha, beta, gamma. Alpha is the least dangerous, beta is more dangerous, and gamma is like cancer-causing, radiation poisoning causing. And they found this black fungus, like this black mold called Cryptococcus neoformans, growing towards the source of radiation. So it was found in the same room where this elephant foot still to this day exists, and it's a black fungus. And they found out it is black because it has a whole lot of melanin in it, right? So they were thinking that this fungus actually uses melanin potentially either as a shield or is able to actually use melanin to absorb the radiation in some form and turn it into energy. They did some tests with this fungus and found that when exposed to radiation, the metabolic rate of these funguses is like 3 to 4 times higher, meaning it's getting more energy when exposed to the radiation. But I'm not entirely convinced they exactly know why, and it seems to me that it would be too energetic for melanin to absorb as is. But again, I'm not a scientist, and that's supported by nothing. But if you take visible light, right? Red light is the least energetic, it's the longest wavelength. And the shorter the wavelength, so the peaks and troughs, the closer those get together, the more energetic the light is. And those peaks and troughs are closer together in blue light. Visible light is the highest energy, or blue light is the highest energy light we can see with our eyes, humans. If you take the energy of one of those blue photons that we could see, and you take it to the gamma range, and say how much more energetic are those photons than blue light, it's like 500,000 to 700,000 times more energetic, which seems like it would just destroy any chemical structure, especially one that was designed to absorb wavelengths of light. So I'm not exactly sure how that works, but there does seem to be some evidence that these fungus are able to actually extract energy somehow from this excessive amount of radiation. It'd be really cool to see if they could figure out exactly what's going on here. But they think it might be that the high energy gamma rays hit the melanin, right? So what they think might be happening is that the gamma ray comes in and hits electrons in the melanin and is then knocking some of those electrons off, which then the melanin or the fungus can use to help produce molecules, energy storing molecules like ATP. I don't know. But regardless of how exactly it's done, it seems like there is just pure evidence that this fungus is able to basically heat radiation or somehow extract that energy from the radiation, and melanin plays some role there. Also, to tie it back to dinosaurs, apparently melanin is so tough that it actually survives in fossils and has been found in some species that are up to 160 million years old. But that's sort of my closing thing on melanin. It seems to be, right, it's in us, it's in fungus, it's in snakes, but it seems to have some really crazy different roles. So it is designed to be an absorber of light, and seems to be that it's designed mainly to be a shield to protect the DNA. But in different species, it serves different roles. In other vertebrates, like the snakes that we talked about, it seems to collect up toxic compounds and protect more sensitive portions of the animal from getting poisoned by these toxic substances. And in frogs, it seems to be able to help shield or help the animal cope with excessive radiation somehow. And in fungus, it might be doing the same thing. And in addition to that, it might be playing some role in collecting energy from radiation. And this is radiation that is very different from sunlight, right? It is a lot more, or at least the sunlight that we get is a lot more energetic. And that's a little bit short of the 20 minutes, so I think I'll actually bring up something that I came across on Instagram. So this guy was talking about animal welfare versus biodiversity conservation. And he goes on to bring up this hypothetical situation where there's an endangered predator species and presumably a prey species. And I'll go ahead and assign, just to make it more clear, we'll say wolves and deer. So we have an endangered wolf species, he claims, and in order to save them, the biodiversity conservation person would say, of course, we should grab the remaining wolves, put them in zoos, and help them rebound, right? We're going to do a conservation program and bring them back from the brink of extinction and then release them back into the wild, right? The conservationist and me, I am one of those people, would say that this is a good thing to do. You make sure the wolves don't go extinct, you put them back, and they'll balance the ecosystem, they'll eat some deer, and that'll be good. He argues that in this situation, you've increased the amount of suffering. This is the animal welfare idea. And I think that term is sort of loaded, right? Because who wants to see animals suffer? That's not a thing. But the animal welfare idea here is that actually you're increasing the amount of suffering for all the individuals here. He says if you take the wolves and you put them in a zoo, they're going to suffer because they're wild animals and you're putting them in a zoo. And sure, I would maybe agree with this, right? The animals would probably be happier in the wild, but they're about to go extinct. He says, and not only are you making those wolves suffer, but when you introduce them back into the wild, you're making the deer suffer because they're not used to having predators anymore. So he says, really, is it ethical to do this? Because it seems like you're just increasing the amount of suffering for all the individuals, all the animals involved. This seems to me to be so naive, and wrong in multiple ways, right? He says it increases animals' suffering for the sake of biodiversity. Is that right? I'd say yes, that's right. That is the correct thing to do. Because what's the other option? I mean, nature is full of suffering, right? Have you ever seen the Instagram page, Nature is Metal, something like that? Nature is gnarly, dude. Things need to go out and they'll eat other things to survive, and nature's not pretty all the time. A lot of the time it is, but things are trying to survive, and that's not always pretty. So if nature is full of suffering, even without human-caused issues, assuming we're taking deer and wolves, we're supposed to let that wolf go extinct? Like, disappear. Because those wolves would be happier out of a zoo, and because predation isn't nice, because deer would suffer if wolves were around. This seems like so backward to me that we're gonna let an ecosystem be forever altered and let species go extinct because of these reasons. Like, suffering is going to happen in nature. That's how it is. He's literally arguing to reduce the suffering for the greatest number of individuals. That is a direct quote. To reduce the suffering for the greatest number of individuals possible. But that would mean removing every predator, every parasite, every berry that would potentially cause poisoning. Like, things are antagonistic towards each other. That's part of nature. That's part of, suffering is sort of baked in. I sort of get where he's coming from, right? From the human point of view towards other humans, we're saying we want to reduce suffering for the most number of individuals. And we've done a good job of keeping that suffering from most humans. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that should change, but it seems like he wants to, and again, maybe this isn't his view, maybe it was just a thought, like a consideration. But the fact that it got some attention is kind of bothering to me, because it seems like he's really arguing, or that point of view is arguing for the curation of nature. That we should be picking and choosing what species are or aren't around to make things more pleasant. But that's not what nature is. And if we let something go extinct, there may be ramifications for many different areas. The ecosystem is altered, even though it took millions of years to adjust to be that way, right? All these species, sure, things go extinct. But things are going extinct because we're taking all the space and all the resources. And to argue that those permanent changes should happen that'll take far longer than humans have been around to adjust, all because it's not pleasant, is pretty wild to me. So I don't know if I'm actually going to post a response on Instagram, but this was something I came across and I thought this was like a wild perspective. And I want to say wholeheartedly, I am from the perspective of biodiversity conservation. We don't know how these things interact completely. It's very complicated. And it takes a very long time for things to change and adapt and fill niches. But things regulate. If you have wolves around, the deer get eaten. If you don't, the deer kind of run rampant and eat too many things. And in some cases, if food is limited enough, they're going to burn through it all and then things starve or something. But that's all I got for today. Please leave a review wherever you're listening. Visit dissectify.com for more nature exploring tools. My Instagram, @nicholas.signs, can be found on the website. Tag me in your nature photos. I'd love to see them. Remember, you live in a world with so many other species, so get out there and check it out. Thanks.